My name is Vreth Golaan, and I want it known for the official record that none of this was my idea. I am a Skavel. We are a proud species. We have 4 arms, silver-grey skin the texture of polished stone, and eyes that can see 17 different spectrums of light. We are fast. We are clever. We are, according to our own cultural mythology, among the most gifted opportunists in the known galaxy. I say opportunists because thieves sound so uncharitable. The story I am about to tell you happened on the trade station Vorruk-Neth, which orbits a dim orange star at the edge of what the humans call the Orion Spur. Vorruk-Neth is what you might generously call a lively station. What you might less generously call it involves words I will not repeat here because my translator still has not recovered from the last time someone used them in close proximity to its audio receptor. It is the kind of place where you mind your own business, where you look at the floor when you walk, where you do not ask questions about what is in someone's cargo container, why that merchant has 3 different names depending on which side of the station you meet him on, or why the security personnel always seem to be looking in the wrong direction at exactly the right time. Vorruk-Neth is, in short, my kind of place, or so I thought. I had been working the lower market corridor for 6 standard rotations. Good work, honestly. Clean work. A bag here, a credit chip there, the occasional piece of jewelry lifted from a distracted tourist who was too busy photographing the bioluminescent fungal displays to notice a 4-armed Skavel with very quick fingers walking past them at a casual stroll. Nothing violent, nothing messy. I had a code, you understand, a professional standard. My partner that rotation was Dunn a Tharok, which means he was short, green, had the moral compass of a hungry piranha, and absolutely zero situational awareness. Dunn was the kind of person you brought along not because he was useful, but because when things went wrong, at least you had someone slower than you to leave behind. I say this not with malice, but with the deep, weary affection of someone who had spent too many rotations in his company. There, Dunn said, clicking his tongue against his teeth in that way that meant he had spotted something. I followed his gaze down the corridor, and that is when I first saw her, the human. Now, I need to pause here and give you some context about humans, because if you are reading this account without prior exposure to the species, you are not prepared. Nobody is ever prepared. That is, arguably, the entire problem. Humans had arrived at the galactic community roughly 40 standard years prior, which, in cosmic terms, is the equivalent of someone showing up extremely late to a party, loudly announcing they have brought their own food, and then somehow ending up running the grill. The rest of the galaxy had spent centuries building careful diplomatic frameworks, trade agreements, and mutual understanding protocols. Humans had spent those same centuries apparently doing push-ups and inventing spicy food and developing something called competitive sports, which, when explained to me, made a Grenthi elder sitting nearby quietly excuse himself and go lie down in a dark room. They were odd, they were unpredictable, they smiled with all their teeth, which every other species in the galaxy understood as a threat display, but which humans insisted was a sign of friendliness. The cognitive dissonance alone gave me headaches, and they were, according to every piece of intelligence that had filtered through the criminal networks I operated in, very, very easy marks. Distracted, sentimental, trusting to the point of absurdity. They carried these large bags filled with what other species would consider completely useless items, photographs of family members, small stuffed fabric toys, handwritten notes. None of it had monetary value. All of it had enormous emotional value, which meant the humans would be too upset about losing it to immediately think clearly about chasing you. That was the theory. The human walking down the lower market corridor of Vorruk-Neth was named, I later discovered, Kira Doss. She was young by human standards, mid-20s perhaps. She had dark hair tied back in what I now know humans call a ponytail, though the visual similarity to any pony I have seen is questionable at best. She was wearing clothes that were slightly too casual for the station environment. The kind of worn jacket and comfortable trousers that suggested she was either very experienced at traveling or did not particularly care what anyone thought of her appearance. She was carrying a large canvas bag over one shoulder. That bag, Dunn breathed. Look at the weight of it. She is barely noticing it. Must be full of something. She looks alert, I said, and she did. Her eyes were moving, which, I noted, most tourists did not do. Most tourists looked at things. This one was looking at the space between things, which was either the behavior of someone experienced or someone paranoid. And honestly, in my line of work, the distinction mattered enormously. She is a human, Dunn said, with the tone of someone explaining something obvious to someone very slow. They do not notice anything. They are walking around half asleep most of the time. I heard one of them accidentally started a diplomatic incident last cycle because they thought the Vorruk-Neth ambassador's ceremonial headdress was a hat being sold at a market stall and tried to buy it. That story does not make me more confident, Dunn. It makes me think humans are chaotic in ways I cannot predict. 50 credit says you cannot take that bag without her noticing. I looked at him. That is not an incentive, that is a dare. Yes, he said. And this is the moment I should have walked away. I want you to know that I, Vreth Golaan, senior opportunist, recognize the existence of this moment. I saw it, clearly, the way you see a warning sign on a road. I saw it, and I evaluated it, and then I, for reasons I can only attribute to professional pride and also Dunn Vecker's extremely irritating smirk, walked toward it anyway. I started moving. I had a technique. 15 years of practiced technique. You approach from behind and to the left, matching the target's pace exactly, so that your footsteps overlap with theirs and become inaudible. Then, as you pass, your hands, all four of them moving in pre-rehearsed coordination, unhook the bag strap, take the weight, and redirect it in a single fluid motion that the target does not register until you are already 12 meters away and picking up speed. It was beautiful when it worked. I was 6 meters behind Kira Doss, 4 meters. 2. I reached out. What happened next is something I have replayed in my memory approximately 400 times, and each time I do, I find a new detail that makes it somehow worse. The bag strap was in my hand. I had it, for exactly 0.3 seconds. The plan was working perfectly, and I was already calculating how quickly I could get to the secondary exit corridor. Then Kira Doss stopped walking. Not stumbled, not paused, stopped, the way a wall stops, completely, and without any preliminary warning whatsoever, and my forward momentum carried me directly into her back, except she had also, in the same instant, turned around, which meant I ran face first into a human woman who had apparently anticipated exactly what I was doing and had pivoted with the calm, unhurried efficiency of someone who had done this before. The bag stayed exactly where it was. My hand, still gripping the strap, was now being looked at by 2 of the darkest brown eyes I had ever seen in my life, at a distance of approximately 30 centimeters, with an expression that was not the fear or confusion I had been expecting, but something far more unnerving. She looked, mildly, interested. "Huh," she said. "Just that, huh." I started. 4 arms, she said, looking at me with the focused attention of someone cataloging a curiosity. "Skavel, right? You guys are supposed to be fast." I said again. "You're supposed to be fast," she repeated, and this time there was something in her voice. Not anger, not fear, something worse. Amusement. The absolute confidence of someone who is not threatened in the slightest, who is in fact finding the entire situation entertaining. I pulled my hand back. She let me. "You can have the bag," she said pleasantly. "There's nothing in it you want." Now a smarter person would have taken this as their cue to leave quickly and quietly and spend the rest of the day in a different corridor, preferably a different section of the station, possibly a different star system. I did not do this, because Dunn, from somewhere behind me, said, "She is bluffing." "Dunn," I said through my teeth without turning around, "please stop talking. She is a tourist, she does not know what she has. Take the bag." Kira Doss heard this, because humans have surprisingly functional hearing for creatures that walk around making as much noise as they do, and she smiled, and it was the full teeth smile, all of them, and I want to tell you that every instinct in my body, all of my 17 spectrum eyes, every sensor I had, screamed at me in that moment. "This is a trap," said my instincts. "This is a trap," said my better judgment. "This is a trap," agreed my survival instinct, my professional experience, and the small, sensible voice in the back of my brain that had kept me alive for 15 years. "Try it," she said, and the way she said it, calm, quiet, almost friendly, with that smile still sitting on her face like it had always lived there, was the most terrifying thing I had heard in 15 years of operating in the lowest corners of the galactic criminal ecosystem. I did not take the bag, but Dunn, because Dunn is Dunn, had been moving up behind me, and Dunn, with all the strategic intelligence of a rock thrown at a hornet's nest, grabbed the bag from the other side. The sound that happened next was not a scream. It was not a shout or a cry for help or any of the sounds that, in my extensive experience, a victim makes when their property is taken. It was a very short, very sharp laugh. One single human laugh, and then Kira Doss did something that took less than 2 seconds and ended with Dunn Vecker, my partner of 6 rotations, a Tharak who weighed approximately 90 kilograms and had 4 years of back-alley brawling experience, lying on the floor of the lower market corridor of Vorruk-Neth with his wrists secured behind him, using what I later learned was called a zip tie and an expression of complete existential bewilderment on his face. She had not dropped the bag. She had not raised her voice. She had not called for help. The entire market corridor had gone, very suddenly, very quiet. Kira Doss looked down at Dunn, then she looked up at me. Then she looked at the bag, still on her shoulder, and then back at me again, and she said, "You want to sit down, or are you going to make this interesting?" And that is when I saw the others. Because Kira Doss was not, as it turned out, a tourist. She was not, as it also turned out, alone. There were 3 of them. They had been in the corridor the entire time and I had not seen them, which should tell you everything you need to know about how humans move when they do not want you to see them moving. One was leaning against a market stall 10 meters to my left, a tall man with a calm expression, who I now noticed was watching me with the relaxed attention of someone waiting to see whether they needed to stand up. Another was near the secondary exit, shorter, arms crossed, with a look that I can only describe as professionally patient. The third, most alarmingly, was directly behind me, and I only knew this because I heard him say, very quietly, very close to my left ear, "Morning." I froze. "We're not here for trouble," the one behind me said. He had a voice like river gravel, unhurried and substantial. "We're here because this corridor has been seeing a lot of activity and our employer wanted someone to take a look." I turned my head very slowly because fast movements felt like an extremely poor choice at this particular moment. He was human, mid-30s maybe. He had a short beard and the kind of eyes that have seen a significant number of things and decided not to be surprised by any of them anymore. He was holding nothing in his hands, which somehow made him more alarming than if he had been holding something. "Your friend," he said, gesturing at Dunn on the floor, "is fine, embarrassed, mostly." Dunn made a sound that suggested this was accurate. "Who are you people?" I managed. My voice was steadier than I expected. "I am choosing to count this as a personal victory." Kira Doss answered. She had crouched down next to Dunn and was checking his wrists with the automatic, practiced care of someone making sure she had not hurt him more than necessary, which struck me as absurdly considerate given the circumstances. "We're consultants," she said. "Consultants," I repeated. "Security consultants," the man behind me clarified, "hired by the station management. There's been a significant uptick in what they're calling opportunistic property redistribution in the lower market for about 8 rotations now." "That is," I started. "A very polite way of saying theft, yes," Kira said, standing back up and dusting off her hands. "We know." She looked at me with those dark eyes, and there was something in them now that had not been there before, or maybe it had been there the entire time, and I simply had not been paying the right kind of attention. She was not angry. She was not triumphant. She looked, if anything, a little tired, the way someone looks when they have done the same job many times and are good at it, but it no longer surprises them. "You're not a bad thief," she said. "Your approach was actually pretty clean, but you hesitated twice, and you let your partner give away your timing. That's sloppy." I stared at her. "She is critiquing your technique," Dunn said from the floor, with an air of total disbelief. "I can hear that, Dunn. She is critiquing your technique while I am on the floor. I am aware of both of these facts simultaneously." Kira looked between us and, I swear on every star in the Orion spur, she laughed again. Not the sharp laugh from before. Something warmer, genuine. "Station security is going to be here in about 4 minutes, the man with the beard said, from behind me. "You can wait for them." Or he left the oar sitting in the air. I looked at Kira Doss. I looked at Dunn on the floor. I looked at the bag on her shoulder, which had never moved, not once, not even when Dunn had grabbed it, because she had not let it move. "What is in that bag?" I asked. She smiled, all the teeth again. "Nothing you want," she said, "but also everything that matters." And outside the corridor, I could already hear the distant rhythmic sound of security boots on the station floor, getting closer. 4 minutes, the bearded human had said. He was wrong. It took 3 minutes and 40 seconds, which I know because I counted every single one of them while standing in the lower market corridor of Vorruk-Neth, with my 4 arms at my sides, my dignity somewhere on the floor next to Dunn Vecker, and 3 humans watching me with the patient, unhurried calm of people who had already decided how this situation was going to end, and were simply waiting for me to catch up. The security team that arrived was led by a Grenthi officer named Parrath, a broad, grey-skinned individual with the permanent expression of someone who had chosen this career in a moment of optimism that life had since corrected thoroughly. He took one look at the corridor, one look at Dunn on the floor, one look at the three humans standing around like they owned the station, and then he looked at me. "Vreth Golaan," he said. "Officer Parrath," I said. "Third time this rotation cycle. I prefer to think of it as consistent employment." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he looked at Kira Doss, who had already produced some kind of identification and was holding it out to him with the practiced ease of someone who did this regularly. Parrath looked at the identification. His expression did something complicated. It went from tired resignation, through surprised recognition, past something that looked remarkably like relief, and landed somewhere in the neighborhood of cautious respect, which for Parrath was essentially the emotional equivalent of everyone else throwing a parade. "You are the DOS team," he said. "We are," Kira confirmed. "Station management said you were coming. I did not expect." He gestured at Dunn. "At me, at the general situation." "We work fast," said the bearded man behind me. I still did not know his name. He had the kind of presence that made you feel like asking his name would be somehow presumptuous, like asking a mountain what it preferred to be called. Parrath nodded slowly. He pulled out his restraint unit and gestured at me and Dunn with the resigned energy of a man who has accepted his life exactly as it is. "You two are coming with me, obviously," I said. "Obviously," Dunn agreed from the floor with feeling, and that should have been the end of it. Arrest, processing. The usual unpleasant bureaucratic experience of being catalogued and charged, and eventually released with a fine I would spend the next several rotations paying off. I had been through it before. I knew the steps. It was in a dark and deeply unfortunate way, almost comfortable in its familiarity. Except that Kira Doss said, "Actually, officer, can I have 10 minutes with them first?" Parrath looked at her. She looked back at him with an expression of complete, uncomplicated sincerity. He looked at her identification again. He looked at me. 10 minutes, he said. "I will be at the end of the corridor." And then he walked away, which was the most surprising thing that had happened in a day full of surprising things. And I want to be clear that the bar for surprise had already been set extremely high. Kira turned to me. The man with the beard, whose name I still did not know, moved to stand beside her with the easy, unthinking coordination of two people who had spent a long time working together. The other two, the tall one from the market stall and the shorter patient one from the exit, drifted closer without making it look like they were drifting closer, which was, professionally speaking, impressive. Dunn, still on the floor, had managed to sit up. One of the humans, the tall one, had, without being asked, helped him into a sitting position with surprising gentleness, which Dunn appeared to find more unsettling than being on the floor. "Thank you," Dunn said, stiffly. "Sure," the tall one said. Dunn stared at him. "Why are you being kind to me? I tried to rob your colleague." "You tried," the tall one said, with a small smile. "Key word. I feel this is mockery." "It's really not." I looked at Kira. "What do you want?" She tilted her head slightly, the way humans do when they are considering how to say something. "How long have you been working this corridor?" she asked. "That is a strange opening for whatever conversation this is." 6 rotations, Dunn said immediately, because Dunn has never in his life understood the concept of staying quiet when it might benefit him. Kira nodded. "And before that?" "Lower dock level," I said. "Before that, the transit hub on the East Ring. Before that, various locations on the second tier. You move around," the bearded man said. It was not a question. "Staying in one place is how you get caught," I said. "Except you are caught," Dunn pointed out. "Dunn, I will leave you on this floor." "You cannot. You do not have the leverage. I outweigh you significantly. I have 4 arms." "This is true," Dunn admitted. "Continue." Kira looked between us with an expression that I was starting to recognize as her default setting, faintly amused, fully attentive, giving nothing away about what she was actually thinking. It was an excellent expression. I respected it professionally while finding it deeply irritating on a personal level. "Skavel have 4 arms," she said. "Perfect fine motor coordination, 17 spectrum vision. You can read heat signatures, which means you can tell when someone's pulse elevates, which basically means you can detect anxiety in real time." "Yes," I said, slowly. "And yet you're stealing bags in the lower market corridor of a mid-tier trade station." The way she said it was not cruel, it was not contemptuous, it was somehow worse than either of those things. It was simply, plainly, factual, delivered with the tone of someone reading a sum that does not add up. Work is work, I said. It is, she agreed, until it isn't. The bearded man reached into a pocket and produced a small data card. He held it out toward me without stepping closer, letting me decide whether to take it or not. It was a small thing, that choice, but it was deliberate. I took the card. On it was a name, a registration number, a channel frequency. That's our contractor contact, Kira said. We work with the Galactic Commerce Authority's security division. Private contract, non-governmental, which means the pay is better and the bureaucracy is significantly less likely to make you want to disassemble yourself. I looked at the card. You are offering me a job. I'm offering you a conversation about a job, she said. There's a difference. This is insane, Dunn said from the floor. You would not be included in the conversation, the tall human told him, not unkindly. We've seen your file. You're a liability. Dunn opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That is, he started. Accurate, the bearded man suggested. A very long pause. Deeply hurtful, Dunn said, but also accurate. I turned the data card over in my fingers. There is something you should understand about being a Skavel with 17 spectrum vision in a situation like this one. I could see things that other species could not. I could see the heat of Kira Doss's pulse at her wrist. Calm, steady, unhurried. I could see the micro-expressions that passed across the bearded man's face when she spoke, something that looked like confidence, the confidence of someone who has made this offer before and knows how it tends to land. I could see that they were not lying, which was, in its own way, deeply inconvenient, because lying would have made this much simpler to dismiss. Why? I asked. Why what? Kira said. Why me? There are better candidates. Species with more raw physical capability. Mercenaries with cleaner records, actual security professionals who did not just attempt to rob you in a public corridor 20 minutes ago. 32 minutes ago, the tall human corrected. Thank you, that is very helpful. Kira looked at me for a moment. Not through me, not past me. At me the way that made you feel like she was reading something that you had not consciously written. Because the best security consultants aren't the ones who followed the rules from the start, she said. They're the ones who understand how the rules get broken, what gaps look like from the outside, how someone moves when they don't want to be seen. You spent 15 years learning how to find weaknesses in security systems. I want someone who can find them from the other side. The corridor was quiet around us. Somewhere distant I could hear the ambient hum of the station, the low constant sound of thousands of people and machines and systems all functioning simultaneously, the background noise of a place that never fully slept. The other side, I repeated. You'd be finding the people doing what you were doing, identifying vulnerabilities, advising on coverage patterns, using that heat signature vision for something that doesn't end with Officer Parrath knowing your name. I looked down at the card again. Sov Parrath knowing my name is a professional relationship, I said. It is a professional relationship where he keeps a file on you, she said. There's a version of this where you stop being in the file and start being the one who reads it. Dunn made a sound behind me. I glanced back at him. He was looking at me with an expression I did not often see on his face, something that was not his usual easy cynicism, but something quieter, something that looked, if I had to name it, like the expression of someone who was tired. Not surprised, just tired. Say yes, Vreth, he said. I turned around fully. What? Say yes. He shifted, his bound wrists clearly uncomfortable, and he looked up at me from the floor with absolute sincerity. I am going to tell you something, and I want you to understand that I mean it entirely without any ulterior motive. That is the most alarming opening statement you have ever made. I have been lying on this floor for 40 minutes, he said. I have had time to think. We are not good at this, Vreth. We are not bad, but we are not good. And there is a difference between those two things that matters, and I think we have known that for a while, and we have been choosing not to look at it directly. I stared at him. He stared back. Also, he added, my wrists hurt, and I would like someone to let me up, and I feel like saying yes to these humans is the fastest way to make that happen. There it is, the tall human said. The ulterior motive. I said entirely without. I did not say without any. There are levels. Kira laughed. The warm one again, the real one. And I noticed that when she laughed, the bearded man beside her smiled, not at her, but at the situation, the way someone smiles at a thing they genuinely enjoy, and I thought for the first time that these were not people performing a recruitment pitch. These were people who actually liked their work, who were underneath the professional competence and the entirely unnecessary ability to put a Tharak on the floor in under 2 seconds, enjoying themselves. There is something very difficult to say no to about people who genuinely enjoy what they do. I put the data card in my interior coat pocket. I am not saying yes, I told Kira. Okay, she said. I am saying I will have a conversation. That's all I asked for. And I have conditions. Everyone does. And I want it on the record that your approach in this corridor today was, from a technical standpoint, excellent. The positioning of your team was very clean. The bait construction was well executed. The way you used the bag's visual weight to imply valuable contents without making it look deliberate was particularly good. She raised an eyebrow. I am critiquing your technique, I said. Since you critiqued mine, for just a moment something crossed her face that was not the practiced calm, or the amusement, or the professional assessment. Something that looked like genuine unguarded surprise. And then she smiled, not the all-teeth one. Something smaller and more real. Fair enough, she said. She looked at the bearded man. He nodded once and moved toward Dunn to undo the restraints, and the tall human and the patient one began moving back to their original positions with the easy discipline of people standing down from readiness without making a production of it. Parrath was already walking back down the corridor. He looked at the situation, at Dunn being helped to his feet, at me standing upright and apparently unrestrained, and apparently in some sort of dialogue with the humans he had just given 10 minutes to, and he stopped. Well, he said. Officer, I said, are you being arrested? I looked at Kira. She looked at me. Not today, she said. Parrath took a very long, very slow breath. He pinched the bridge of his nose. He looked at the ceiling, then at the floor, then at some middle distance that contained, I suspected, the ghost of the life choices that had led him to this moment. I am going to write a very confusing report, he said. You're very good at those, I said. I have read several. You have read, he started. The ones about me. Professionally. For research purposes. He looked at Kira one more time. She gave him a small nod that contained within it what appeared to be a complete and silent conversation about authorization and jurisdiction and mutual professional respect. And Parrath, a Grenthi officer who had seen 15 years of the lowest corridors of Vorruk-Neth, put his restraint unit away and walked back toward the security hub without saying another word. I watched him go. The lower market corridor was already returning to its usual state. Vendors resuming their calls, foot traffic beginning to flow again, the brief interruption folding back into the general noise of the station, the way a dropped stone folds back into still water. Kira Doss stood beside me and looked at the corridor with an expression I was beginning to understand. It was the expression of someone seeing the job that still needed doing. The bag, I said. What about it? What is actually in it? She reached in without looking and pulled out a small battered notebook, paper, actual physical paper, handwritten pages, clearly old and clearly used. She held it up. Field notes, she said. 15 stations, 4 years. Every vulnerability we found, every gap we mapped, every technique we documented. I looked at the notebook, at the bag, at the woman holding both of them. That is what I tried to steal, I said. That is what you tried to steal, she confirmed. A pause. I would not have known what to do with it, I admitted. No, she agreed, but now you're going to help us add to it. She put the notebook back in the bag, settled the strap on her shoulder, and looked at me with those dark, steady eyes. Come on, she said. I'll buy you something to eat, and we can talk about what comes next. And Vreth Golaan, 15-year veteran of the lower corridors of the galactic criminal ecosystem, 4 arms and 17 spectrum eyes and a professional record that Parrath had apparently memorized, made the second most surprising decision of a day that had already been full of them. He followed her. Dunn walked beside him, rubbing his wrists, and said, very quietly, I want it noted that I called this outcome. You did not call this outcome. I said, say yes. You said say yes so they would untie you. Vreth. Those are not mutually exclusive. The tall human, walking on Dunn's other side, made a sound that was suspiciously close to a laugh and covered it with a cough, and Dunn looked up at him with an expression of narrow-eyed suspicion. You think this is funny? Dunn said. Little bit, the tall human said. Dunn considered this. Fine, he said. It is a little funny. And somewhere behind them, in the lower market corridor of Vorruk-Neth, a station that had seen more than its share of things it would rather not have, the ambient hum continued, and the traders called their wares, and the foot traffic moved in its usual patterns. And for the first time in a long time, Vreth Golaan did not know what came next. He found, to his very great surprise, that this felt less like danger, and more like the beginning of something worth doing.